into it. Channel. Mute this. Perfect. I got the stream renamed. Alright. We're live now. Just waiting on Lance to get back. We'll go ahead and get this thing kicked off. When do you usually get to play, EXO?
When do I usually get to play?
Yeah. Do you like play during the day or what? I never see you online
Oh,
much.
during the day, if I'm working, like I might be able to sneak in a set or two, but normally I don't.
Yup, yup.
And then at night, usually I try to sneak in a set or two, probably around 10 Eastern or
I'm
so.
back.
But it's hit or miss. What's up,
Alright.
Sonny?
We got Sunny in the chat. I went ahead and started it. Lance got his renamed and all that, so we'll give it another minute or two. Let
Nice.
people pile into the chat, and then we'll kick this thing off, you know? All these viewers.
It still says featuring Dr. Stillhammer on my end. Is that true?
I mean, it could be.
That's me. I'm Dr. Steelhammer.
What? I changed it. Let me go back. Let me go back, dude. Live. Maybe it didn't save. Live. Oh. Oh, I did the live notification, not the title. Live with
Nice.
done. Now what does it say, Lance?
I don't know. Why with Exodus3rd? You did it.
I did it. Look at me, I'm pro streamer, dude.
Did you post it on Twitter like, oh, we're starting now kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm doing that right now. Why I gotta do everything, Lance? What is your?
I don't have a Twitter.
What is your role in this podcast here?
I'm the star power.
Let's just go with that, Ray.
Yeah, sure. Lance
Yeah.
is the star power. Everyone.
Did you know I am a top
Oh
top
my
eight
word! I don't want to
three-time
hear it. I don't want to hear it.
Jazzy finalist?
We're here with the actual champion, sir.
Before that, I made top 16 at both TFCs. I'm kind of just a consistent.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Top 16 at TFC. I mean,
Yeah, pretty good, huh?
can't really argue that.
Can't argue. That's pretty mixed.
All right. I think we got everything good. It's up on Twitter. You guys ready to begin?
I'm ready.
Yeah, sure.
All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the DFW Third Strike podcast with Lance and myself. I'm the good one. Lance is the terrible one. He's just here to fill in space, as you know. And then
Does this hill say starting soon?
no, it should say. Oh, it does actually.
It does.
Yeah, Ray's a good
Yeah.
one, guys. Don't worry about it.
Hey, I'm the mastermind behind this thing. You know. Is it good now? Working properly?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, good.
Yeah. It does.
We are here with the reigning Jazzy champion, Exodus, Khang. How you doing,
Hi.
sir?
I'm well. I'm recovering from a cold still, but otherwise I'm good.
Well, welcome to the podcast. We're stoked to have you on. So, third guest. Yeah, we've had Nika now, we've had Steelhammer, and now we have Khang. That's a
Tough acts to follow, for
yeah.
sure.
Who's lineup of the American Third Strike? So, how's things been going post Jazzy? Have you been playing at all, or?
I try to get at least one set in every day, maybe, but it's been more miss than hit.
Have you played any offline sessions since then?
No,
Oh, really?
no. Oh, they actually just had Juna Matt just hosted a get together yesterday, and I couldn't make it. So
I saw that with Issei was out there, right?
yeah, and I try to, like, if Issei's there, I try to come, but it wasn't in the cards. It's a little difficult now with a second daughter. So yeah, most of my weekends, if I'm not just like dead, I'm like going around
Yeah.
for play dates and stuff. So,
Doing the dad stuff. How old's the second one?
she's 9 months.
9 months.
Yeah,
Oh wow. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
So we
Good
wanted to
times.
we kind of wanted to dive into your history of Third Strike. When did you first hear about the game? Like when did you first see it for the
Yeah.
first time, and when did you start playing?
Um, that's a long history. I pretty much played when it came out. I was a mall rat, so I would, go to the mall.
Mm,
Before that, we actually had a standalone arcade that I would frequent, and there would be, NBA Jam, NBA Showtime,
mm,
Tekken 2, Tekken 3, and you know, uh, X-Men, Children of the Atom, and Marvel superheroes and all that stuff. So I wasn't really into Street Fighter 3 at that time. Like I like New Generation,
mm.
like Double Impact. Just I skipped right over it.
Yeah.
At that time, I feel like I was just mashing buttons in like Tekken 2 and Marvel superheroes more than anything. But then Third Strike, um, I saw it in there's a Namco had uh, a franchise. I think it's called Timeout or something to that effect. It's like a little arcade in the mall, and they had
Mm,
Third Strike there. It was like American stand-up cabinets. So I just played that and didn't know anything about anything for, I would say, probably a year and a half
mm.
while it was out. So I didn't know about, tournament scenes. I didn't know about competitive play. Sure, you can all new to me. And then eventually I met some people and they were like, "Oh, you should go to game time." And I was like, well, "What's game time?" So apparently in Virginia, about an hour away, there was an arcade called Game Time, and it was a favorite of the region essentially. And that was where the FGC for Maryland, Virginia was. And so they told me about it, and I tried my best to go. It was like every month or so, every other month they had a monthly, and I'd have to take the metro there and kind of BS my way because it was on a Saturday,
Yeah.
and so yeah, my my extracurricular pursuits are pretty much frowned upon by my family. So anytime I even like go out to friends' outings, it's
Yeah.
it's always some type of BS. And so, disappearing for a day, someplace else and playing Street Fighter over the weekend is a little hard to muster up. But I did what I could to get there, and then that's when I found out. Oh, there's this forum called Shoryuken, and then my first tournament was at University Pinball, which was the old stomping grounds for the Philly scene, and this was Northeast Championships 2.
Wait.
And
What year is this, King?
I want to say this is maybe 2001,
Okay. Okay.
around there. Yeah.
We're only at
So
2001 at this point in the story. He's
It's.
been playing for so long, and he finally. Anyway, we'll get there.
I was gonna say like
long, long
King's been
history.
playing longer than some of the kids in our scene have been alive. Like legitly.
That
That's
is true.
that's what I try to explain to him too. Like you're not supposed to beat him. Like that's
Um,
not for you. You know. So
yeah.
continue
So
though. Continue.
and I fell in love. I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like I remember um Canada came down Toronto, and at this time they were known as TOSF, like Toronto Street Fighter, and they were pretty big about making like 3S content.
Hmm.
And so they came down, and I played with Marvin Lee and Aneurysm X and Yellow S4, like all these old school Toronto heads. It was a good time. I think at that time it was more memorable because Eno had come, the
Makoto player, right?
Makoto player,
Yeah.
and he was like showing people Canadian, right?
Yeah.
And he was showing Kara Shoryuken with Ken, and I was like, "What the fuck is all this?" Right? I
Yeah.
was just playing Akuma at the time, just still a mall rat
Yeah. Yeah.
essentially. But yeah, that was when the sharing of tech was pretty hard come by was, you either had to be there and learn about it or, had to hear about it secondhand somehow. Um, but yeah, that was my first legitimate competitive tournament outside of, those game time monthlies. And then pretty much tried to play the game as often as possible. And then I've been through all the iterations. So I think it was maybe 2005 was when the original Xbox, the 15th anniversary Street Fighter had come out, anniversary collection, and it had online play, but it was delay based.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
uh, that was a good chunk of my life, just playing on Xbox Live. Um, and I had a local scene, but the local scene was more about getting together every month or two and duking it out. It wasn't so much that I had gotten together with friends and like grind it. Right, most of
Yeah.
my grind was still online. Though although I did play in college quite a bit. I had some friends in college when we were in dorms. And then Xbox Live, the original, and then friggin' Kylera when MAME was happening in IRC chats, and then OE, and then 30th, and GGPO, 2D Fighter, Supercade. Um, so I just ran through the whole spectrum of shitty online play. Um, and so rewinding back to NEC two. After that, I tried to make every NEC, and I was pretty a big advocate for Third Strike. So eventually, I approached Eric, Big Eric, who does all of the NECs, and at that time, NECs, summer jams, winter brawls.
Mhm.
He has a seasonal roulette of tournaments, and I was like, can I, if you don't have anybody running Third Strike, can I be the person to run Third Strike? So, all throughout all those years, like, 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I would try to run Third Strike there. And then it kind of died down.
Mhm.
So, I guess around Street Fighter 4, maybe 2009 or so, tournaments stopped happening with any regularity. Um, and so I reseeded quite a bit. And then I think maybe 2014 I think it was winter of 2014 was when Tony Majors
Mhm.
brought cabs to, I think it was either NEC or Winter Brawl at that time. But then I was like, I think it was NEC. And that was the NEC preceding the Summer Jam that Lance went to. So when I went there, during that time I was pretty much a poker head, just
Mhm.
going to Atlantic City quite a bit. And if there was a tournament in Philly, I would drive over. Um, but then I was like, oh wow, we actually have cabs now because that
Yeah.
was not available.
Were you guys
And
playing on
so,
like console or like Super Gun?
well, prior to that, we were playing on PS2,
Mhm.
Dreamcast, whatever we could muster.
Yeah.
Essentially, no super guns.
Okay.
That wasn't available. So once we had lost physical cabs, we were on Dreamcast most of the time, I think. Um, but then, uh, so Tony Majors was saying that he's pretty much going to be supplying those cabs at every con, at every major. So then we asked him, well, let's run their strike again now that we have two sets of cabs. So going to that summer jam, and then the NECs, and transitioning to the TFCs was when we tried to start really pushing their strike back in, and that was when New York had all those fight clubs. Um, and it was going pretty good. So and then here we are after
Yeah.
TFC, a little year off, and then Jazzy, and then well, I guess there wasn't a year off then because TFC 2018 fed into Jazzy. So yeah, and then now we're here. Uh, yeah, that's I've been playing the entire time pretty much.
Did
Um,
Did you dabble in any other games? I know, like specifically, like when I knew about the game when I was in high school, but I wasn't really playing like competitively or anything. But when Street Fighter 4 came out, it was like there was no talk of Third Strike whatsoever. Like it
Yeah,
basically just killed Third Strike. Like you couldn't find
it did.
anywhere. You know it was dead in the U.S. at that time. Like I mean there were small pockets like Cali and stuff. They were still kind of doing their thing, but like you didn't hear about it at tournaments. Like it wasn't a thing like that. So, or did you try
Yeah.
any of the other games?
Um, very briefly.
Yep.
I wasn't really like I've never been like fully balls deep in it, right?
Yeah.
Um, so once I think when Evo pulled back and said, we're not highlighting their strike anymore. I think that was maybe 2008,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 2009. Basically when four was getting really big, and they had that 2v2 third strike tournament. I mean, it wasn't Evo couldn't really muster the true hardcore third strike crowd just because they never ran it faithfully.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was never. I don't think I feel like they might have had 1 or 2 years where it was Super Gun or Cab, but there's always issues of some sort.
Yeah.
Um, so at that point, I wasn't really big into Street Fighter anyway. So I mean, I tested four out, but I wasn't never gonna play any other game competitively. At that time, it was a lot of WoW and a lot of poker. So
Uh,
short answer is no. I gave five a shot. I gave it 2 months.
yeah.
Four pretty similarly. So. Yeah, no, it's either Third Strike or nothing. Like,
So, what were you doing? Okay, so you guys talked about Street Fighter 4 kills off Third Strike, right? 2008-ish. I feel like
mhm.
at on West Coast it lasts a little longer, right? Like they're kind of still playing at least until 2010-ish and that goes into Sun Route
En
Cup.
route, yeah.
Yeah, but from like 2008 to 2014, what does the East Coast look like? What are you doing? Like, are you just playing online constantly? Uh, who are your rivals at the time? What's happening in your Third Strike world in this time period?
So my memory is kind of hazy, so I might be getting this wrong because poker the schedule kind of drags on and like your days blend and then you just lose track of time. But I feel like so once um I know that we would have like maybe this was like 2011, 2012, similar times as Sun Route. Like I was kind of playing to play, not really looking at their strike in the community at large. But if there was a tournament and I happened to be in the area, I would drive there in Philly specifically. As far as what I was doing, I feel like I was so maybe the 2007 to 2010 period. I ran a lot of Kylera tournaments. So this was when Tenren and Cruz and Nika and Chirathi were really into it in these tournaments that I ran. Um, but aside from just playing casually on GGPO and 2DF, uh, I wasn't there was no like I didn't feel like there was a active Third Strike tournament scene. So I mean, like people can have majors, and then at the majors they can kind of corral together and run a tournament. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't consider that like a legitimate like you know like it's not something people would buy into, right?
Yeah.
It's either yeah, let's do it since we're here. Not really it's certainly not something that has a lot of pre-planning like TFC and Jazzy. So um, from my perspective, there was no national Third Strike tournament scene. And that plays well into 2014, 2015. Like even when New York and House of Strikes and Fight Clubs, it started building itself back up. But when I was running TFC 2016, like the intention there was to try to kind of get back to the old roots of having a national tournament that everybody could kind of buy into and participate and plan ahead of time. Practice essentially and train. So, so once I think TFC 2017 was there, I think that's a good benchmark of yeah, there's a collective buy-in at this stage. It didn't last, of course, but now we have
Mm-hmm.
Jazzy, which also got disrupted. So, but I think their strike is in a good place. It's certainly as healthy as probably it's ever been outside of, when the FGC at large bought into it, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so people come and go, but the game is still here. So
Hmm. Now that kind of dead time, right, for those years where there's not a national tournament scene, like a lot changes, right? Like online kind of came out, and then over the next few years, like better versions of online come out, right? You've got like GGPO is probably better than the delay based ones, right? And then
yeah,
OE, especially on 360, was pretty good netcode.
yeah, on the
Um,
CRT.
yeah. And so a lot of people are still playing online a lot, right? And there's this time period where like, okay, the understanding I feel like at the time was like, okay, the best players are all the West Coast, right? FFA, etc. But there's also you guys who are playing online a lot, and I remember it being an exciting time of like, like you guys, you and New York are kind of combining to let's make a national tournament scene, and we got to get people to buy into it. But there's like a lot of question marks, right? Like, who is the best? Can these online players compete? What's the pecking order? So, yeah, I mean, that was definitely a thing, right? Like, I feel like that was on everyone's mind, and now we just take it for granted at this point that there's this national tournament scene, and every year we're going to see a lot of the best players. At the time, it was a big mystery. Like, who is the best American? Like, oh, is Yuki like up to that level now? Is Nika up to that level? Can Khang play offline at all? Is he an online carry? Well, do you have any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, so during that dead time, there was always, I guess, there was always some level of contention between East Coast and West Coast. That's just FGC in general. Marvel, CVS2, it doesn't matter. Like,
Okay,
in terms of Third Strike, SoCal was always regarded as, mini Japan, right?
sure.
Outside of Japan, they were the best. But it was hard to realize that in any um, confident kind of like, it didn't manifest to where you could confidently say, yeah, they are absolutely the best. And it's not a matter of, well, I don't think that they are the best. It's just that the opportunities never really came to fruition to where we can have that play out, at least in any repeatable manner, right? Like, right there, that's buzzing. Um, so back then, it was, Pyro and Yi, and they didn't care to travel because it was like, why are we going to travel to the rest of Mongolia? Like, they need to come to us, right?
Yeah,
And
of
then,
course.
New York was coming up strong at that time, and they had their own scene. Um, and then, there's the one-offs like the Tenren, the Yuki, the EXO, and we were primarily online. Of course, Yuki made a name for himself. Even when he was in Hawaii, but in terms of the bigger picture, it was up in the air for, I think, quite a while, like extending all the way up to PFC. Like, you never really had that opportunity to say, 5 Star is going to play Yuki or something like that. That didn't manifest for a long, long time. Um, so yeah, and yeah. Does that answer your question?
No, that's good. That's good stuff. Okay, next question. Uh, so you have a long history of not winning third strike tournaments. I feel like for the most of the time that I've known you, you have, you didn't win.
Mhm.
You'd high place high. You say, I don't care. I don't care about tournaments. And then this year at Jazzy, you just won, and you looked, I don't know, you looked pretty strong, right? Like, I think for the most part, you looked, you know, very like it's like the best tournament performance I've seen from you ever. Was there anything that shifted for you between all those and now? Has anything changed at all? Is it always the same? Do you feel any kind of pressure when you play in these tournaments? Yeah. What about all that?
Um, so I've always been kind of a complacent person. So even with competitiveness, like, I'm competitive to a point where if it's not if I feel like I can't put in the earnest effort, then I'll just dial it back, because then it's some people might say that's an option select, But the way I view tournaments is that everybody has their own circumstances and backgrounds, and not everybody can train for 8 hours a day and then compete, right? Um, so in terms of that, like I've never put too much stake into tournament results um, just because of those considerations. Like I've always thought tournaments are a good time to come together collectively and break bread and hang out with your friends that you normally don't get to see. Um, so in terms of pressure, I don't like like I guess it's just going through the motions. So in terms of the win this year, I don't think I did anything too differently. Um, uh, Probably the stars just aligned, with who I had to play. I mean, I certainly tried a bit more because it was Father's Day, and I felt really bad about being away from my family,
Mm-hmm.
especially because at that time my daughter was 4 months old.
Hmm.
Um, and so there was that, but I even then I don't think that I was like super dialed in. I felt like I probably got a pretty lucky break. I don't think I faced too many Chun Li's. Um,
Yeah, I would have crushed you if we played. Just so you know.
and and the things I dropped were not dart shot super, but
Hmm.
I didn't feel like I was in any situation where I was upset, which typically uh, plays into my previous losses. Like even if I try, like if I try and then I fuck up, right, and that causes me to lose, then it just kind of sours the entire experience for me because I know that I could be doing better, but overall, like I don't think, yeah, like I I think the stars just aligned this year more so than anything, uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, we'll see what happens next year.
How was coming up at a because you had to qualify through last chance qualifiers, right? Like, how is that
Yeah.
when you do like basically a big tournament the day before just to get into the real tournament? Like, how is that like when you have to go through that grind just to okay, I finished the tournament and now I have to play the real tournament? Like, what
I actually prefer it.
really?
Um, I think for Jazzy one, I qualified through TFC unknowingly because I didn't know at the time that TFC auto qualified to Jazzy one. But if I had to do it, I would always just go to the finale and play because I like playing in big tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
I think those who auto qualify through either means kind of robs himself of that last weekend experience a little bit. And it's different for other people are like, no, I don't want to fucking play through pools. Are you fucking crazy? It's certainly harder, but I get enjoyment out of that more so than I would saying, oh, I'm definitely in top 16. Um, yeah, so I wasn't too worried about having to auto qualify. So yeah.
I get the sense that if you went to Jazzy and you died in pools, right? Something you fucking ran into, I don't know, like Arlieth, and he does something to you, and then you lost to like a Chun Li or something, and you just made 17th place, so you don't even make it into top 16. Like I get the sense I wouldn't really bother you that much.
No, it wouldn't. I mean, I probably, I probably could have done better, but it's not. I wouldn't be punching walls or anything.
Okay.
Well, now you can say that
Uh,
because you already won, huh? You're just like, well, fuck it, I won last year. Whatever,
Well, I mean,
guys.
I didn't win Javelin one, so.
Mm, true, true.
okay, next question. Your history of Third Strike to me is very bound up with like online play. You've been one of the biggest proponents of online play, even when it was less popular, right? Like there was a long period of time when I was starting of like online's not the real game. The online star players are not that good. They're just getting carried by lag. Um, and I feel like that's something that's definitely a reputation you had early on, right? Along with a few other players of like, yeah, Khang can win on GGPO. Can he win on the real game? We don't know. Um, but I also feel like that, my impression is that a lot of you guys who kind of came up later, right? Like who kept improving over like that dead zone and then going into like the new modern tournament era, like online was a big part of your growth. So I guess the question is, what has online Third Strike meant for you as a player?
It's kept my smile.
Okay.
For the most part. I feel like online is pivotal. I think if we didn't have online, we probably wouldn't much have Third Strike as what it is now. So yeah, I think people gravely underestimate just how important online is in that role that it plays. Um, as far as it being a tool, like I think everybody has to kind of uh, dial up their humility a little bit and realize that online has enough there that they can improve upon um, to make it a worthwhile investment of their time. There's of course going to be some set asides, like if online just pisses you off and it's extremely detrimental to your health and your happiness, then that's one thing, right? But if you can actually uh, use what it's good for, and at the end of the day, you're not upset and you're not like, it doesn't affect the other relationships in your life, then you can grow from playing online. Um, like just I think it helps keep a body warm. Like if I didn't play online, I wouldn't be playing Third Strike through a good portion of all those years that I just went over, right? So I think and um, uh, I say this with as much humility as possible, but the proof is in the pudding. Like I'm good enough to where I can freely play and not have to worry too much, right? Um, and it's there hasn't been a time where I've like really put effort into training any particular thing. It's just, and that's why my execution's, it's good, but it's also bad, right? Because the repetition will help you regardless if you feel like you're dropping something here and it's important, right? Overall, you're a stronger player. You develop things. Your senses are still sharp. You don't go cold. I think online is really useful for that.
With this
Okay.
year's
What? Go ahead.
with this year's Jazzy coming up, we're gonna have potentially online qualifier, online monthly for points. Like,
Mhm.
do you think that's valid for like the Jazzy tournament circuit to have like an online portion of that for people to qualify through?
I think it really depends on how they structure it. Like if I'm just making an assumption here, but if they can either go two routes, right? They can either do the monthly points accruement, and it'll
Mm-hmm.
just be like another tournament venue. It just
Mm-hmm.
happens to be online. And I feel like that might be where they're headed with Stupid Strike.
Okay.
Or the other part is, it's just a one-time online auto qualifier. Um, in either scenario, I think it's more a net positive than it is. Certainly people might have opinions of it, like, oh, it's online. Like you can't really put too much stakes into the results of online play, and that's certainly true. Like the higher you go up, the like online kind of loses a little bit of credibility, right? Certain things that are crucial as an exchange in an offline tournament scenario just is not possible online. Um, but I think in terms of using it to promote the game, promote people to engage within the community, introduce new people to their strike, and you know, send somebody who normally wouldn't play offline.
Mm-hmm.
If they're strong enough and they perform well enough and they get that spot, they're going to come to the finale. And I think overall that's just a really big positive to keeping the scene alive. So, um, you know, I don't, I feel like people who put a bit too much emphasis on online results and then kind of trying to either give it um, validation or try to instill uh, a false sense of validation. Like like let's just say for example, it was a single auto qualifier, and somebody who you feel like they don't deserve that spot, and they ended up taking that spot. Like, I feel like if you were putting in the mental energy and especially the outward energy to make that point, I feel like there's more productive things that you could do with your time than to kind of linger on that. Whether I agree or disagree with you or not, right? At the end of the day, it's I think it's a positive for the community, and I'm quite happy that they're actually even considering that, because previously the rules were a bit more stringent on who can accrue points. So I think broadening things is ultimately better, even if it means Lance cheeses all the points. So
Hey, I played Chun Li, where she's known to be nerfed online. Have you
Oh my
seen Tommy's?
god.
Have you seen Tommy's online tier list? Chun Li is C rank. Uh, yeah. Any- anyway, okay. So how different are online and offline? What are some things that are different? Uh, that makes online not the real game.
just uh, so at the highest levels, you're gonna be considering things that are like frame perfect, right? And there's just no possible way for you to rely on frame perfect things online, just because there's rollback. There's literal frames that are being skipped over throughout the course of the match. Um, so things like that is the short answer to it, but a quite succinct answer, I would say.
Mhm.
Is there anybody from, with the online qualifiers and things coming up, is there anybody you would like to see that plays online that maybe hasn't had a chance to go to a Jazzy that you'd like to see, like maybe win that or get points or anything like that that you could potentially see at the tournament?
Um, so I haven't put too much thought into it, but I feel like the first thing I would consider is, are they going to be playing on stick, right?
Okay. Okay.
I feel
Yeah.
like there's going to be
Very
a decent
important.
amount of players that play on keyboard or hitbox, or some other peripheral that isn't just solely a stick. Um, and I feel like Jazzy might make concessions there with a USB port. I personally wouldn't agree with it. But
Tell us why. Why would you not make concessions?
well, I feel like, not even talking from a purist perspective.
Hmm.
Um, I just feel like mechanically, um, the peripherals that don't have the joystick kind of circumvent the intention of the game, because neutral input is a crucial element in your execution, and so any type of leverless input automatically always has neutral guaranteed, right? Um, and so at that point, it just is a matter of how proficient you are with that peripheral. And so if you drag that out to the extremes and you say this person is perfectly executing with this peripheral, they're going to have leaps and bounds of technical advantage over somebody who just plays with the joystick.
What does it let them do? So I've never played what do they call it, leverless, right? That's the term, leverless third strike.
Leverless.
Yeah, so
Um,
the easiest explanation here is, if you double tap, right? If
okay.
you perform a double tap on a button, you can essentially cut the neutral from it completely, right? Let's say frame perfect double tap, you get a dash, um, and so a leverless peripheral is just a button for your directionals. So if they double tap directional, they will get a frame perfect dash, right? So that will always be inherently better than somebody playing on joystick, because when you're playing on joystick, you have to physically push and then let it go and then push again. So there's always going to be, 3 to 5 frames of neutral input that you can't get rid of. Like, even if you tap really fast, right? The faster you tap, the more unstable your execution is, right?
Hmm.
Um, So at that point, somebody who does that offline, they don't telegraph any type of dash. Like their dash is frame perfect. You cannot physically recognize that they're gonna dash because those 3 to 5 neutral frames are missing. You don't see that stutter before they dash.
Mhm.
Um, so that's one example, and then the other example is red parries, right? So if you're blocking, if you're blocking down back and you want to do a red parry, you have to go to neutral before you tap your parry,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
With leverless, they just have to let go and then hit
Forward.
the
Yeah.
direction, right? So that neutral, that requirement for you to maneuver a stick is completely gone. So um, that's 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 the innate advantage of the hardware.
Now, can you
So
cheat with like okay, can you like let's say with charge characters, can you like walk and keep your charge? Like that's just like in impossible ways on stick. That's what I'm asking. Is that allowed? I don't know anything.
it's not allowed. So before it was certainly something that before it got patched, or it has to be introduced as a software to prevent it from happening, right?
Mhm.
Because of course the game was never coded with something like that in mind.
Yeah.
Um, so unless there's the SOCD um, cleaner, um, SODC, whatever it is, the simultaneous directional
Mm-hmm.
cardinal directions, or whatever the fucking
I think it's
abbreviation is.
SGGK. I think that's what it is. No, so that wasn't that funny, King. But anyway,
No, this is just the code. Uh,
okay.
excuse me. But yeah, so unless there's software within that stick or leverless peripheral to accommodate for that, technically it probably still works.
Okay. So, and I imagine walk blocking would be easier, right? Like or more precise.
Yeah, there's no like you can walk and then block. I mean, it's just how fast your fingers can move versus physical
Motion.
stick.
Yeah.
So
So, if we made you king of the Third Strike world, you're in charge, making all the decisions.
yeah, I
Are
would ban hitbox
you'd
on
been hit
on
What about
yeah
pad?
You say it's
on
just like
tournament play.
cheating. Would you say it just goes to so far as cheating, or it's just like a really big advantage? What's your
It's a technical advantage that
okay?
skips over the game mechanic. Yeah,
Oh,
let's say that.
so the game mechanics work so well because it's on stick, because it's on lever. Like you need these limitations of stick to like make this game work. I guess.
No, but I mean, if Third Strike was designed in 2023 and Hitbox has been out for ages, right? That's a different story. But
Okay.
it was designed with stick in mind. So to answer the question about pad, pad has always been acceptable over the console version simply because um, there's other um, downsides to the actual pad, like
Mm-hmm.
that limits how far you can take it. But technically, the mechanisms there are the same as a leverless. But like you're not going to be double tapping a direction with the pad
Yeah.
versus a button.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
quite the same.
Yeah, when I
Mm.
started playing, I actually was a pad player originally because I didn't know any better. I started playing around the PS2 days, and I started on pad, and I stopped playing pad because they banned like three punches, three kicks being mapped to one button, and then I realized like, oh, I can't Kara throw or like I can't EX consistently. Like I can't do this, so that's when I switched to stick, and I didn't look back. But I don't know. I just feel like the beauty of Third Strike is like we get together, we're gonna play on like we all agree like okay we're playing on a cabinet. This is like the playing field. This is a version we're playing on. It's set in stone, right? Like you see modern day tournaments now with like Street Fighter 6 and stuff. It's like oh the monitors are laggy. Oh I don't usually play on these. I want to play on PC. You want to play on PS5. Like oh I
Yeah.
don't have headphones. Like there's all these variables when it comes to it where it's like Third Strike is just like you're gonna show up, you're gonna play on the Versus City cabinet on that version
Hopefully,
of the
yeah.
game, and that's what it is. Like
You're gonna
Everyone,
play on shitty sticks. They're
yeah.
gonna bounce. You're gonna lose a match in top eight because your character jumped instead of
Yep.
supering. Right. This is all part of the
Yeah,
experience.
it's a part of the experience, right? But it's like
There's a DDR machine right behind you.
Of
you,
course.
yeah.
Yeah, I know all about the fucking DDR machine.
But you know what you're getting into that weekend, right? Like you're not gonna
Yeah.
show up and be like, okay, I've been training on the specific PC monitor on my PC or a PS5 or something like that, and then you get there and it's like, oh shit, it's like they're using this version of the monitor or whatever. Or I don't have headphones. Like there's not those variables in it. It's like the stick. They're gonna vary wherever you go. Hopefully you can
Yeah.
adjust over the weekend, but like you know what you're getting yourself into. So I just feel like
Yeah.
introducing
And-
another controller or something to it is just like, what are we doing? What are we doing here?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, essentially it's about limiting variables, right?
mhm.
Like the hardware, the status of the hardware is always going to be, up in the air. Like home field advantage is a thing,
Mhm.
you got to get used to the sticks, but that's just a given, right?
Yeah,
But if you also have to contend with other things, um, the game speed, that there's issues with that. So,
Okay, speaking about game speed, I have another question. What do the words dart, shot, super mean to you?
um, yeah. So, um, uh, when you take the breadth of just how wide my game environment has been, you
hmm
you can sort of see why I drop so many things as I do. Um, and it's really funny because in the first decade, right? So we're talking, 2000 to 2010. Like it never really even occurred to me that I was playing with so much delay, right? Like I just, grind on Xbox Live in like stick smoothing against some guy from California, or even worse, like somewhere in like Europe, and then go to a PS2 tourney and just play there and not even make that connection. Like it was, I don't know why I've just never thought about it, but the ever changing game environment certainly played a role, like even subconsciously in how I execute. So I don't know. And then going back to the whole hardware thing, right? Like when you're on GPO, like do you have a low lag monitor?
hmm
And do you have a low lag stick? How much more lag are you adding to your setup that you just have no idea? Like, and I think, as I grew to be more proficient with communicating about the game, that then I realized, holy shit, like I've played through a whole lot of garbage, right? Like even just within the past 3 years or so, like before Fightcade 2 came out, I still had my old Samsung monitors that I had had for since like 2005, and we're talking about 25, 26 ms of extra input delay.
Yeah, they were dog
Um,
shit. I remember those.
yeah, yeah, there was a funny story. My buddy Nick, El Wraith Magnifico,
hmm
he came over to my house one time, and we were trying 30th anniversary at this time on Steam, and so I just let him play with it, and he was like, "What?" Like he was just so bewildered at just how laggy it is, and I'm just sitting there like, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. What do you mean it's laggy, right? But thinking back on that, like he's absolutely right because he's used to a different setup completely, and his is much lower lag, and then he has to play on somebody else's old ass monitors. Um, so yeah, like it's a funny thing. What you have to give up to continue enjoying this game, right? A typical player, like you're just completely unaware. Um, yeah, and then you have to go play on cab where it's like slow as fuck, and
Yep.
so you're gonna mess up even if you consciously tell yourself, "Hey, I gotta slow things down." You're still gonna mess up because you can't untrain years and years and years of ingrained execution for a weekend. So
Yeah, I remember a time period where I felt like watching you, you could not dart shot super on any platform. Like your timing existed in another realm in which it was linked to no platform, online or arcade, and you just could not link overheads into super with Dudley. I feel is that
Yeah,
does that yeah, that sounds right. Do you
yeah.
feel like these days? So in my opinion, and I think you probably let me know. In my opinion, Fightcade 2 is like the closest overall to arcade that online has been.
Mhm.
And maybe did that play into you winning Jazzy this year? Like finally, you can practice online and something that's approximately close to arcade.
That's I think that's the crux of it. So, Fightcade 2, you know, no small feat, but the developers really put in a lot of work and effort and really listen to the community at large with their strike because we are not the easiest community to work with.
Yeah.
But they have made a number of improvements, the past 3 years to accommodate essentially our requests. And the very last one was the game speed, right?
Mhm.
For a long, long, long while, they just went with the norm, which was, hey, any type of digital recreation of this game runs at 60 frames per second, right?
Mhm.
Um, and especially online, like everything else runs in 60 frames, so you're gonna match that. Um, but then they really looked into it, and now if you're playing somebody far, it's still not gonna feel like it's offline. But if you're playing somebody in 10 ms, 15 ms, it you have more frames that show up, and so and then now with the game speed, you're really getting close to that 59.59 or whatever the fuck it is that the actual arcade hardware is. So no, super props to them. So if you have a low lag setup, which I bought new monitors for um, during this Fightcade 2 era. So yeah, no, to your point, I would not doubt that my success at Jazzy is in some ways benefiting from that change, from Fight K2 being the best version of online, from the lower lag. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so from my impression from Flight K2, so I had like a low lag monitor before, but it was like 60 hertz, and it felt to me that like I had to use run ahead. Like it just like I was like, oh no, turn run ahead off. And I know we argued about like whether it does anything for the opponent, blah blah blah. But it's like there's no way, at least on my setup, because I have like a Hori stick, so I know like that's been tested, like a 360 Hori stick, so it doesn't have any lag. So we've eliminated that variable. But playing Flight K2, I was like, there's no way this is the same as arcade input lag. It just wasn't, right? That was my feeling. So I always played with run ahead one. But I went ahead and got like a high refresh monitor, and I think I checked with you and a couple other people, and I ended up with one. And
Yeah.
once I did that, to me, I'm not saying it's exactly the same. I've never tested it, but now like I turn run ahead off, and I'm like, okay, this feels about right, right? We're in the ballpark as far as game speed and input lag. So yeah, I've turned run ahead off at that point. Um, yeah, does that sound right? I mean, that's been my impression.
Yeah, yeah. So if you, I've been saying it for a while that if you are running 144 hertz, there's a big difference enough between 60 and 144 that you don't need that extra frame from run ahead. Um, and the problem with run ahead is that it introduces more CPU strain. So if you happen to be on a little weaker CPU and you're playing run ahead, and then um, you can be introducing more um, problems than the extra frame solves for you. And most people don't realize this, but it's beneficial to have the FPS counter display on, because then you can sort of see where the fluctuations are. Like if you're constantly monitoring it as you play, um, or if you're playing and you feel like something's not quite right, like there's a jerk every 10 seconds or something.
Hmm.
Like when you look at the FPS display, you're supposed to really only see numbers fluctuating, within zero point 0.5 frames of that intended frame. So 59.6, right? So you're looking at the top end 60.1 or 60.2, and on the low end like 59.2, right? So if you are seeing numbers that go outside of that range, there's something wrong there, right? Whether it's the internet, whether it's your computer, whether it's your opponents, but something's not quite right. Like the game is not running as it should outside of all of the other variables that are given. Like you're gonna have rollback, you're gonna have frames that uh, get sacrificed. But if you are playing somebody and everything else is otherwise perfect, you should only see FPS within those two numbers.
Cool. Ray, any thoughts on any of that?
No, I always just message Khang and say like, "Does this work?" And then he's like, "Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, do that or set it up this way." And I'm like, "All right, cool." I know he's done the homework, so I'm always just like, "All right, whatever he says, I'm sure it's the best." So
Yeah, King you wrote a guide, right? You wrote a guide for like setting up. I feel like you've written multiple online guides.
Yeah, so there was that one Google Docs that somebody had uh, authored, and then I did the third strike portion of it. But after a while, I stopped updating it. So it's a few revisions old. But ultimately, the guidance should be somewhat the same. It's that you kind of stick with the default and then mess with the settings a little bit. So if you feel like it's too laggy, then use Redhead 1 unless you can't. Like if you putting on Redhead 1 feels worse, then obviously switch it back to 0. So I mean, there's a bit of a scientific requirement for you to kind of explore because there's no one size fits all, right? Everybody's dealing with different hardware. Everybody has different perceptions of the game, so it's difficult to narrow down. But those are the recommended settings. So try to have a decent computer, a decent 144 hertz monitor, and it should end up being the best version of online that you can play. So if that or have played. So if that's not the case, something's probably up.
It's crazy, right? That we this is a 24-year-old game, and we're like, okay, well, you need a pretty good computer, and
yeah,
you need like a fucking 160 hertz monitor. I'll make sure your arcade stick doesn't have any input lag,
yep.
right? You probably
Yeah.
want fiber internet. Like, there's a very high requirement to play this 25-year-old game on the internet,
True.
somewhat comparable to offline.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was telling my wife. Like, I need to build like a good PC. She's like, "What are you gonna play on it?" And I'm like, "Third Strike and World of Warcraft." And she's like, "Both of those are 20 years old." I'm like, "Yeah, that's all I want to play though." So
Yeah, like Ariana Grande was like building me a computer. It's like she was like, send me the money, and then I will just build you a computer like at cost. Shout out
Yeah.
to Ariana Grande. Um, and at the time, I was like, oh, I want to play the new Resident Evil 4, the new remake, and that's why I got it. But yeah, I ended up not playing that, and so yeah, now it's just like a much beefier computer where I just play Third
Or Third
Strike and
Strike.
Left 4 Dead
yeah.
2. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
What stick do you use, King?
I have a Hori Fighting Edge,
Fighting
so the
Edge. Okay.
metallic silver looking one. It's where is it?
Very blurry.
Yeah,
He's got focus.
I don't know why it's so blurry.
I think it's blurry because you're blurring your background, and it considers that part of
Oh,
your background.
you're right. But you get
Yeah,
you get
yeah.
it right.
Or
You can
Fighting
kind of
Edge.
see it.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. It is because I'm blurry.
Is to censor this arcade stick. Okay, well, just shifting topics a little bit. We talked about nerd stuff for a while. That was cool. But a different topic entirely is I want to talk about your philosophy and your approach towards the game. So I'll approach this from both angles. So you have been accused, I guess that's too strong a word, but you have been called the guest parrying. Of all the top players, you are the guest parrying one. You are the one who's guesses all the time, and you've compared Third Strike to poker, which everyone. I talked to a lot of people about like a lot of the top people. I always just wanted their advice or their thoughts on everything. So everyone has their own approach to the game, the way they view it. But you talked about it being kind of comparable to poker and making what do you call it, like EV plus EV. I don't know anything
Yeah.
about poker. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about that, about your approach to the game. Yeah, that's the question.
Um. Okay. So yeah, certainly something very comparable to poker. So the general gist of it is you start with a certain framework of default options that are generally good, right? And then from there, you take in observations and you make adjustments accordingly, right? Um, so in practice, that might look like if you're Chun Li, you want to build meter, you don't want to engage too much, right? Because if you engage early, you're looking at single hit pokes versus getting comboed. Like if you're playing against Dudley, you don't want to freely engage and then get scooped and then get rinsed before you even have any meter, right?
Mhm.
So a general framework of good things to do, and then once you have a good idea of what your opponent's habits are, once you've tested some things out, oh, he mashes throw on wake up in the corner, something like that. Then you can make adjustments as necessary. And that's, kind of analogous to poker because you have, your starting hands, and there are hands that you should absolutely fold, and then there are hands that you should play, and there are hands that you should play if nobody has raised in front of you, then you raise, but otherwise you just call, right? So you start with those good principles, and then you adjust. Like after a while, you're like, oh man, this guy in front of me is pretty passive, so every single time he joins the hand, I will raise, even if my hand is not that strong in the general scheme, right? So things like that. Other things, going to the whole guest parry element. Um, People feel like whenever they get parried, the other person's guessing, right? And sometimes that's true. But I feel like it's a very shallow analysis of the situation. Um, in actuality, I feel like I've um, I'm certainly guess parry heavy because in neutral, like I want high reward interactions. And so if I know that the parry itself is a low risk, high reward, I will be going for it because mathematically that works in my favor. And that's the plus expected value that you were referring to earlier. So plus EV is a poker term where basically it means this decision that you are making spread across the entire, finite um, combination of things that you can make will net you a positive, right? So like boiling it down, like whenever you raise in this exact scenario, you're gonna make $1 long term. Like that's a plus EV decision. Um, so I'll give you an example. Let's say you're playing Yuri and Mirrors and you do a whiff headbutt, right? And then so what do? Like it whiffed. At that point, once you land, you should high parry, right? Why should you high parry? Well, Ukraine doesn't have anything low that can punish you. Um, so then the high parry is pretty much guaranteed, right? If they try to launcher, if they try to stand medium punch, like either you're gonna get hit or you're not gonna hit. Like if you whiffed, if they don't fuck up, then you're gonna get punished, right? Nothing you can do. You already made the mistake. But if they mess up, if they're slow, if they choose the wrong button, your high parry covers all of their options because they don't have a low option, right? At worst, you're going to get thrown. But hey, when your high parry connects, you have a launcher, which could very well end the round. Um, so in that sense, the parry is a very plus EV decision, right? Even like you could take it a step back and say that whiff headbutt is a plus EV decision because taken in totality, that interaction nets you the win more so than you get punished, right? Um, so
Whiff headbutt being plus EV sounds like a very online player thing to say.
Well, no. In this very specific example of year
You're
and
talking
year.
Yuri and Mir. Yeah, I get
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Not in general. Like, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not
I just
saying you
whip
can
him,
high
and then
parry
I
when
back throw him, and
and
then I win.
against Chun Li and she'll low forward super you or anything. No.
Yeah, yeah.
Um. So, the analysis needs to be more than just surface level.
Mhm.
But it's very easy to say, because you got hit by that, they're a fucking guest parrier. But and that might be true, but uh, it at the very least deserves your finer attention and analysis.
I feel like you
Because
don't wake up Perry that much. Does that sound true?
it's mostly true. Yeah,
Yeah, I,
I try not to.
I my impression from having played you a lot over the years is you mostly just guard on wake up. I feel like you don't even guard jump that much, or maybe you guard and then jump.
I guard
Uh,
and then jump.
you
I don't
guard
guard
and
jump
then jump. Yeah.
because I
Uh,
can't time for shit. So I don't even know what like hold down for 5 6 frames. I can't fucking
yeah.
visualize what that feels like.
I love what
Yeah.
Khang's putting down right now. This is amazing.
Guards and then jump. Yeah, I too guard and then jump. Um, yes, I mean, in terms, I'm thinking of like other people who are like like strong players or difficult. Yeah, I feel like you mostly guard on wake up. Um, I feel like I feel like that's the bulk of your defense, honestly, right? On wake up at least.
Yeah,
Actually, it's like I've been like I'll play like
unless I don't give
Makoto
a
against.
fuck.
What's up?
Unless I really don't give a fuck.
You're just like hitting buttons or something.
Yeah, like if I'm trying to win, um, I would not be waking up guest parry. Unless, if you're Dudley and it's clearly a Okizeme situation, you're forcing me to have to make a decision there. So in that situation, it might be um, allowable or um, what's the word I'm looking for here? It might be fuck, what's the word? Basically forgivable if I wake up guest parry.
That's
But
an interesting thing you're bringing up. Like when they're forcing you to make a guess, right? So Dudley's a really obvious one, right?
yeah, yeah,
Dudley
yeah.
Oki's coming. It's high low. You have to guess no matter what. Now, as a player on defense, I imagine you guess there, right? What about on offense? Do you try to avoid those? We're like, okay, we're both guessing, so one of us is right. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so in terms of that approach, I like corner control. So I don't attack on wake up all that often. Unless I'm fully stocked, and it makes sense to. Or unless I know that the likelihood that the opponent is gonna reversal with something is low. Because obviously if it's higher then I have to account for that, right? Um but yeah, I think playing in a way where you control the match. So in this case, you put your opponent in the corner. You want to maintain that position throughout.
Mhm.
Is more important than getting a high-low in or getting anything in.
So it sounds
Like,
like you're being less aggressive, like less scary, right, on offense, and you're trading that for more consistency and control.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
because the flip side of that is, let's say I attack, right, and then my opponent has to guess, and they win the exchange, and now I have lost all control of that situation, right? I feel like that's more detrimental to me than just not trying to put that pressure or not manifesting that extra damage and still maintaining that positional advantage, right? Because um, one of the things people don't quite grasp, um, at least not in the beginner and intermediate levels, is that you can apply pressure just by standing still, right? If you're out of their throw range, right, and you're standing there and they're waking up in the corner, they're gonna feel pressure regardless if you actually hit a button or not. Um, and that allows you to, or it gives them the opportunity to make mistakes for you, right? If you're standing there and you're, just threatening imposition on them, they're like, ah, fuck, I gotta shore you here. And then they shore you. You've done literally nothing except stand and block, I hope. But you're allowing them to make mistakes. If you then are too aggressive, then you kind of rob yourself of that avenue. Um, and in the grand scheme of things, you want to um, not narrow from your opponent's perceptions of you, not narrow your choices, right? So if I'm gonna attack, I'm either gonna attack high or low or throw, right? So then my opponent only has to work with those three choices, and then that allows them to make easier decisions, right? If you're forcing somebody to guess, they're like, all right, I just gotta guess. Here we go, right? But if you kind of increase the the pathways to which they have to handle that mental stack, right? They have to like, oh man, is he gonna fucking high? Is he gonna fucking low? Is he gonna throw? Is he gonna just chill there? Like, it's more pressure than getting a dart shot super, that type of thing.
Sunny asks, how do you reconcile this with Chun Li having a wall jump? Does that let's say you're attacking Chun Li specifically, right? And if I just maybe you stand out of the timer or something, or you're going to not pursue Oki, right? Chun Li has great escape options. I guess other characters do too, right? Like twins could like super jump out or something.
Mhm.
So
Um,
how do you kind of deal with that?
so it goes back to what I said earlier, where you have a general framework of good choices to make, right? Or good decisions to choose from. And if I'm telling you standing still is a good decision, and then you see that your opponent has recognized that is an opportunity for them to wall jump out, then you can say, well, that's an option. I have to now reassess with that in mind, and I should attack more. But
Mm,
there's other implications there. Like if Chen has no meter, you're free to attack, right?
sure.
Um, um, and and you can feel it out. Like a neutral jump is one of your options, right? Um, in the event that she does jump. So um, yeah, just stand there menacingly, and then you can chase her, right? If she's really good, she'll pair your EX Air Tatsu, but otherwise, you're gonna peg her on the way out, and then corner push her to the other side. Um, Yeah, but third strike is a conversation that you have with your opponent. So if they're telling you that they're capable of wall jumping, then you need to listen to them and factor that in for the next time. Yeah.
I like that analogy. I don't listen to anyone.
Yeah, ready to yell. I'm gonna do young shit now.
It's my turn, baby. No,
Um, are you a good parrier?
What does that mean?
Like, are
Are you
you
a
particular? Like,
carrier?
is this a skill you think you're better than most people at, or are you just
I
average and you're just making smart decisions?
I think offensively pairing is more important than people realize. Yeah, because you have to force your opponents to make mistakes, and you're essentially calling them out for it, which is not only just beneficial because you're going to get the damage, but also demoralizing for them because you're one step ahead of them. Um, so yeah, it's I feel like I'm good there. At least my intentions are good. My execution might not always be good,
Sure.
but the game plan is definitely there already. So
Do you think that's because you picked Dudley as kind of he's like your somewhat main character? Like, is that something where you feel like I really had to get good at pairing because I play Dudley?
yeah, no, so you know, I've always been a homebrew type of player. So let's talk about Dudley then, right? So things you can't do with Dudley online. You can't towards medium kick, because the confirm is just so too fast, right? It's such a great butt, but would you be able to confirm it in 4 frame delay? No, right? Or if one of those frames happens to be a rollback frame, then that's less information that you are able to process. So um, things like that, or the Kuroda approach, where it's too cheap. Dart shot is too cheap, right? Can't fucking see it. Can't fucking deal with it. It's annoying as fuck when you get hit by it, right? Online, that's even more true, right? So I actually, for a long time, intentionally didn't dart shot, didn't okizime, because I wanted to focus on how can I use my belly to approach neutral more, right? So I gave my opponents plenty of opportunity to wake up because I didn't feel like going high low. Um, Also because the timing is so variable, right? When you're playing online, like a micro stutter that takes place sometime before your set play can completely change your timing, because you feel it, right? So things like that, like going back to, if it annoys me, I kind of just say fuck it, whatever. So I try not to do things that are scripted, because things that are scripted tend to have to rely on timing. So everything I do is more kind of uh, in the moment or reactionary. Um, but yeah, I feel like I'm going a little off the question
No,
now.
No,
no,
this
no.
is great.
I actually like this. Yeah, I like this a lot. So, because I'm not
Yeah,
like a set play heavy person. I just kind of yeah. So I don't know. I see some people are like, oh, you have to learn all the setups and everything like that, but
it's tough.
yeah,
Like,
it's very difficult.
how can you do it when you are playing with different people? And for me, I don't practice, right? So I just like playing is playing. I use the opportunity in the game to practice, but I don't actually practice. Like,
Mhm.
I don't go into training mode. I don't look at rows setups, things like that. It's just learning shit on the fly, and over time, repetitively, over years and years and years,
Mhm.
I've developed that homebrew approach. So jumping in, finding different ways to parry, uh, things of that nature. So yeah.
So you don't
Yeah,
training
you
mode
kind of
at
mentioned.
all? Get Kang? Like when's the
Oh, that's
last?
good. That's what I was
Yeah,
asking. Yeah,
when's
because you're no training mode and you're no footage, right? You don't watch
Yeah.
Japanese footage ever.
Um, I don't watch with the intention to learn. So it's not to say that, I've never watched a co-op cup in my life. Like, I've obviously, at the very least, passively watched some footage. But I don't watch it to kind of, unless it happens so often that I recognize it. I don't watch with the intent of saying, well, why did he do that there? Or can I emulate that in some way? And yeah, no training mode. So everything I try to do is either, in the game. So I'll give you a specific example. Like, there was a period where I was like, so I just did super here, right? And how do I go about getting a roast setup? So I would literally, in the course of a set, try different button combinations and different timings to say, oh yeah, that feels kind of right, and then repeat that the next time around. Um, so for Ken, right? I'll do a shippu, and then I'll walk, and then I'll feel like this is the right space here where I can jump and make it ambiguous. And it's never consistent, but when it is, I was like, hey, it works. But yeah, it's not like, don't follow in my footsteps if you want to get better quicker, right?
So you've
But
never like you've never been like, okay, I'm struggling like Dudley Chun, I'm gonna go watch like Yamoto versus Ricky Maru or
no,
something like that.
no, I'm really stubborn. So either I can do it by myself,
Mhm.
or I just ran my head against the wall until I can do it. Yeah.
I like this. I like this.
Yeah, Ray's like, this is music to my ears. This is exactly what I want out of this game.
Don't study,
Um,
don't training mode, just play the game. You're gonna get better.
Yeah, just I mean, when you play, you obviously want to be mindful and analytical, right?
Hmm.
Um, if you're the type to not be able to kind of pull yourself in third person
Hmm.
and kind of like watch yourself while you're playing, then it's a little different. Then you need to supplement in other ways. But I've always been the type to, when I hit a certain interaction and it happens more than once, like I try to memorize that so that in the next time I can change it in whatever ways that I feel is appropriate.
So maybe not other people's footage, but do you go back and you watch your own tournament footage or
Mm-mm.
replays? Nothing.
No.
Man, Kang is the best, dude. I love that. I love this. I love this
Yeah.
so much.
yeah, so you said something earlier I found really interesting. You talked about how you chose as Dudley not to just go for Oki offense every time. And
Yeah.
I remember, so there's this thread, and I've kind of referred a lot of our new players to it on SRK. It's like 5-star teaches third strike, and he
Yeah.
describes a very similar mindset where he felt like he was stuck at a certain level, like he wanted to get better at parts. He's like, oh, I'm really good at Oki, but I want to be like I want to be better at other things. And so he also chose. He's like, I already know I can win just by attacking on Oki every time, but I'm just going to choose to like I'm going to beat them in other ways. Is that what you were thinking there, or was it more like, oh, it's too risky to attack? Like, are you trying to develop a skill set,
It,
or what's happening here?
all of the above. So
Mm-hmm.
so it all plays together. But when you're talking about things like set play, right? Either it works in your favor or it doesn't. Like there's no at that point it's just a pure numbers game, right? Like if you have Denjin, either they can get it, either you are gonna hit them or they're gonna parry their way out. Like there's nothing more analytical to get from that exchange, right? I mean, you can charge faster, like mechanically, you can improve, but if I'm in a situation where I'm trying to improve as a Ryu, and I feel like my dungeon's pretty good, uh, or even if it's not that good, but I know that I just have to work on mashing faster, right, or charging better, then uh, there's no mystery there, right? But let's say my pitfall is neutral. Like I have a really hard time getting to Denjin, or extending that to Yun. Like oh my Gunajin's pretty good. I can execute pretty well, but then like fuck, I keep throwing out shoulders after 1 2 3, and it's just not working out right. So things like that. Um, the the once you get to a point where it's either you get the damage or you don't get the damage, then um, from the analysis point of view and from what you can get away from it, it should be pretty um, small compared to looking at other areas of play. So either I get the dark shot or I don't, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't help me become a better person or a better Dudley.
Nice. Okay. Um, Shifting gears a little bit, and this will. So, you went to co-op for the first time. This was, I guess, at this point it was like 4 years ago, right? Like
Yeah,
it.
end of 2018, I
Wow.
think it
Yeah.
was.
COVID happened and just stole a couple of years out of everyone's life. It doesn't feel like that long ago to me. Um, okay, so what I would like to hear your experience in Japan, and especially I'd like to hear stuff about how did the meta feel? Like, how did players play against you that you thought was different? Um, just give me your whole experience of Japan, whatever you want to
um,
talk about.
so in terms of I'll dial it back just a little bit before Japan. So when the Japanese came in 2017, like that was my first time where I felt like I wasn't doing myself any favors. Um, because if I want to be competitive, I have to change something, right? They came and they pretty much demolished everyone, more or less. And for me, I was running TFC, like I was on fumes the entire time, but I wanted to be a competitor. Like I don't want to throw that opportunity away. So my takeaway from TFC 2017 was sort of like I want to I want to compete. I want to play them, right? And that played into my decision to go to co-op. Not so much because I wanted to play in co-op, because I didn't care all that much about the tournament itself. But
Great
that
thing to hear
I
from your teammate, by the way.
well, I mean, uh, it's not like I'm gonna lie about it. It's like, like tournaments are fun for me more so than anything else. Like if I could put together a real co-op cup team and even repeat it, then that's a different story. But like this was a one-time thing. Like there was never going to be a situation where I could put myself on a team that has the best shot of getting as far as we can all possibly go. Like that's just not a thing. Like I'm just playing with my friends. We're having a good time, and the chips fall where they may fall. Right. Um, but going back to my motivations, I really wanted to go to Japan and kind of get a good feel for everything. Like I wanted to see how people played. I wanted to, enjoy myself more so than anything else. But like running first to tens, playing at Newton, and just the entire experience of going to Japan was really good. In terms of the competitiveness, um, uh, at that point, like it's not like I went like I trained before going to Japan, and then I going there was to test my metal. It was more or less the same as what I've always been, which is I have a certain set of skills, and I'm just gonna see how I fare, right? But the takeaway from Japan was that I want to play more and take it a bit more seriously, because otherwise I'm kind of robbing myself of some some level of experience that I've not had before, right? Going back to how complacent I've always been, right? And I've certainly made some strides in that, but at the end of the day, the complacency is still somewhat there. Like it's not like I'm still not going into training mode, and I'm still not trying to see how other dudleys play and things of that nature. But I switched to Rocket just so I could force myself to reassess the game, the plans, and so on and so forth. Um, but yeah, if it's a question of should people go to Japan, absolutely. Like find yourself a good 3-4 week period where you can go and kind of just experience what um, being in Japan is like. Don't well go during coop, but not for coop. Like um, it's like for me, like I don't feel like partaking in coop from a competitive perspective is um, worthy of your time.
Mm,
Probably
interesting.
because you're just gonna get washed, right? Or your team's just gonna get washed. Unless, like I said, you can repeat that. Let's say like 4 years in, you're like, all right, we have really good synergy. We got a strategy going on, things of that nature. We've really all put in together um, time and effort to become better players. Like that's a different story. But nobody going to Japan their first time is gonna have that experience with Coop. So, but uh, fucking going to eat with other players that you would obviously never have the opportunity to, and playing casuals at free play, whether it's at noon or GameSpot versus or things of that nature. Talking broken Japanese or broken English to Tominaga, things like that is really good, and I had a great time in Japan. Sure.
Yeah, I remember you doing really well in Japan. So, like you and I hung out a lot there. And I remember, right, like for instance, you were like going even with Tominaga with like multiple characters, or like you had a set versus Genki first to 10, which you narrowly lost, I think, like 10-8. Does that sound right?
No, I think it was down to the wire.
Now 10-9. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, what was that experience like? I mean, was there any sense of validation for you? Like, oh, even against someone as good as Tominaga, I can go back and forth. I'm so good, or I really am a good player. Is that part of your mental makeup at all? Do you care about that, or was it more like, oh, I'm? Because I remember you telling me at the time, you're like, oh, I wished I could live here because like having to push myself all the time this way, like it's been really fun.
Yeah. Um, my mental makeup doesn't usually have that in mind. Like
Hmm.
I don't take results more so than like unless it's like completely repeated over and over and over and over again. But certainly not a situation where you go for an event or a weekend and you're like, oh, I did really good. This totally validates what I've been thinking. No, I don't. I don't. I don't. I'm a very scientific guy um, by nature, so that type of repetition and data is important to me. Um, but I think the takeaway is just like I really do love this game, right? And I wish this community doesn't go away in any way. Like people get older, right? Is Tomonak gonna play in 2025? I don't know, but I certainly hope if I return to Japan, I'll get to play him again, right?
Mhm.
Um, so it's more so than the results. Like I don't really care all that much about it, but like whether or not I did the best that I could do with the circumstances that I operate under, and if I feel like I had a great time and the other person had a great time, like at the end of the day, that's what matters the most.
Well, yeah, I know you've talked a lot. I mean, you and I have talked a lot over the years, obviously. So I know one thing you've mentioned a few times, and I think I agree with, is like the circumstances that everyone finds themselves in regarding this game are so different that taking results at face value can be quite difficult, right? Like it doesn't really make sense to hold yourself to a standard of like, oh, do I am I as good as the top Japanese players, right? Because their circumstances are so wildly different from
Hmm.
ours, right? You've been playing on 20 different online versions of Third Strike. Meanwhile, they've been playing all these best players like at Newton for like 10 years or whatever. And even within the US, like you've talked about, like, everyone's circumstances are different. Like there was a time period when New York was like really grinding the game. Like this is when they were like, really making statements, making top eight over and over with all their best players, right? And
Yeah.
at the time, you were feeling like, because at that point we were getting to a place where this game's there's a national circuit happening again, right? And at that point, I imagine maybe there's a little bit more where you can say, okay, I can take this seriously and try to compete because we're all, we're trying to get on the same page. Does that make sense? Did you try any harder?
I tried for Jazzy 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. Not so much as, training and stuff, but going to the tournament and trying to focus in the match. I certainly took it more seriously than I normally did. Um, and that was the intent. I don't remember what I placed. Um,
I think you're like fifth or something. That sounds
uh,
right.
Probably. I know that I messed up against Nika a little bit, and I think I did some jet uppers out of frustration. Uh,
Okay.
but I think ultimately, um, I did uh, kind of I was true to my word a little bit in terms of taking it seriously and wanting to be a competitor, and that's sort of part of the reason why after TFC 2017 I was like I'm not gonna really run tournaments anymore because 2016 and 2017 took a huge toll on me because I was hosting you guys at the apartment at the time, and I was still going through school, some courses, and then driving down there with my PC and then streaming and running the tournament almost single-handedly, aside from some bracket runners and some commentators, but it was a lot to do and also compete. Um, and I would of course do it again, um, going back then because the objective was to make sure that we got back to a place where we had a national tournament. Um, but yeah, like I think had it not been for COVID, I probably would have wanted to do Jazzy too, um, and three. But
Sure.
I think I hope Jazzy certainly doesn't stop in some way. That at least doesn't transition to something else. Um, because ultimately, even if I don't participate, I think like the game is so beautiful, and there's so much more to give in terms of the community that I hope it continues for quite a while. And every circumstance, going back to your circumstances, like everybody does have different circumstances, right? So don't take results too seriously, and you just kind of have fun and do the best that you can do, and then hope that everybody else also does the same thing, right? And repeat it again the next year. Um, it's difficult to take any type of results with more than that surface level, simply because you don't know what everybody's circumstances are. And it's silly to kind of ignore that because I think it's a very um, it's a very important thing to not ignore. Um, yeah. So yep.
Let me play devil's advocate here. Okay, so you say it's important not to take results too seriously because you don't know what everyone's circumstances are. But isn't it's a competitive video game, right? If we're
Mhm.
not going to take the results seriously, why are we meeting up once a year to see who's the best? Why are we having tournaments at all?
You do that because it's what needs to be done. But until sorry, like this isn't like the NBA where you have literal collective buy-in from every single participant, right? Every team knows exactly what's in store. They train, they practice, they go at it with 100% or, as close to it as possible. Of course, money is really a big factor there. The point is there's a collective buy-in. Um, you know, my win, Lloyd wasn't there, Ryan wasn't there. Like there's that analogy doesn't quite work between the NBA and Third Strike. So you have to kind of make some concessions and pull away from that, right? The results are not as legitimate just because everybody has different things, right? Like how do I know that Niaban was in his best shape when I won in grand finals? I don't know that, right? Um, so it's like, but you work towards it, right? You do want to have tournaments and you do want people to play their best. Um, but you kind of have to humble yourself a little bit and realize that real life is a thing and it's not going to be perfect. So um, you do with the best with what you've got.
Okay. Um, Considering this is a competitive game, if we say, okay, the circumstances make it difficult to necessarily tell who the best player is, how do you decide who the best player is? What's your criteria?
Um, just years and years of data. So I think there's not even now. There's not really a singular best person. Like if you like in terms of Third Strike, I've always been the proponent to uh, do clusters of people, right? So going back to 2016, the thing was, hey, Clash of the Titans, right? So it wasn't a full list, but it was a representative of the demographic spaced apart, right? SoCal has some representation, New York has some representation, Texas had some representation, and online had some representation.
Like, oh, I
But
just invented a new region. It's Fightcade 1, and I nominate myself.
in all seriousness, um, I don't think without that collective buy-in and you know of that NBA caliber, can you definitively say, hey, the Warriors are the best team this season, right? I don't think like just because I won Jazzy this year doesn't mean that I'm the best player this year. Um, and I don't think we're ever going to get to a situation where we can definitively say that unless somehow the stars align and 5 years running the same people go every single year and they compete. So yeah, I don't think it's ever going to be able to manifest that way.
You think I know you spoke of like clusters of players and it's very hard to determine who's the best player out of them. Do you think that's just because like Third Strike is that kind of volatile of a game where it's
There's that too.
like one decision you lost the round, it's like you could make nine decisions right, but that one decision you made wrong is that's it, it's over. Do you think
Yeah,
that kind
yeah.
of goes into it as well?
Yeah, I guess this will transition quite nicely to whatever next question Lance has in mind. But in terms of if you want to make definitive statements, you got to have definitive data to back it up, right? So you can't say this person is better than the other person unless literally you have dozens and dozens of examples of that actually taking place. Um, and yeah, I think it's foolhardy to latch onto any singular person as the best player or things of that nature, or just even two players between each other. Like, how can you say one player is better than the other unless you have like tons and tons of data that would support that argument? And if you do have that data, it should already be plainly obvious that it doesn't even need to be a point of discussion, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it sounds like you're saying that basically it's a question of sample size. Like we could take a tournament results seriously if only there were more tournaments where all the best players showed up and they were all actively practicing.
Hmm. And we can't get that. So
So
we just
it'll always be a mystery. Who's the best?
I mean, you get some close impressions, but at the end of the day, how can you argue it? Right? It would be synonymous to saying, "Oh, who's a better boxer, Floyd Mayweather or Muhammad Ali?" Like,
Yeah.
you can't answer that question. You have people on both sides of the fence with their impassioned stance, but ultimately, it's not provable.
Hmm. Okay, I want to kind of dial in on something you kind of alluded to and dig into it. So you talked about your complacency over the years and not being able to be that interested in tournament results. Now, I have heard from reliable sources a theory that says the reason Kang doesn't care about tournament results and has been complacent all these years is because early in his career there was this time period in East Coast where the East Coast best players is like Justin and Kang. Like, does that sound right? You guys were like the best two probably earlier.
Um,
Yeah.
Probably somewhat close to it. Like I didn't do all that much traveling either, but
Hmm.
I was certainly one of the topper players in the region. Um, but yeah, like it goes. So I think I know what you're alluding to.
Hmm.
But essentially, yeah, like Justin was I felt like was the best player, the best Third Strike player in that era, right? And then it's simply because, and we had huge just arguments over this, and I'm sure you can. But I mean, Justin traveled everywhere and just demolished everybody, right? Even if he happened to be weaker than Pyro or Five Star or the rest of SoCal, the point is like he put up those stats, right? And if at the end of the day, if you can't refute that, because you have some part that some responsibility to prove that wrong. And SoCal didn't travel all that much. Um, Going back to your question, yeah, like there was no way for me to train and do well at versus Justin. So the scheme from 2004 to 2008, at every tournament where we did meet up was I'm just gonna lose to Justin, right? Because there's no way for me to, you know, uh, even setting aside the fact that I was playing online in different situations, like there's no other Chun that plays like Justin, and I can't train against a Chun that plays like Justin unless I actually live next to Justin. So it was something that I realized early on that you play with the best hand that you're dealt, and beyond that, like you know the amount of effort that would need for you to overcome that situation is so high. Like for me, like I feel like it's not worth the effort. So yeah, I'll take second place. I don't care. Right. So yeah, it's doing the best with what you've got and being realistic with your expectations. So like there was no way where like I was gonna beat Justin in any uh you know reliable uh uh situation.
So, um, so basically, approach to tournaments is like, okay, I'm just not going to lose, and Kang's approach is, it's fine to lose. It's fine to get second place.
Yeah, like I don't have a problem with losing.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. Um, okay, new topic. I want to ask about this. So there was a time period on Twitter, everyone was posting their third strike tier lists, and you had probably one of the most interesting ones, in which I believe you put like 16 of the characters on one tier, and then
Yeah.
like fucking like Remy, Sean 12 at the bottom or something like that. Talk to me about how you see third strike balance. Uh, yeah, just
Yeah,
give me your whole
yeah.
spiel.
I think 16 of the characters was on the first two tiers, and then Sean and Remy in 12. Oh, I think it was just Sean in 12
Okay.
was all the way at the bottom, just because they're just not they're just yeah. It's
Okay.
I feel like Third Strike. at the end of the day, is a game that has avenues for you to uh, manifest wins, right? Chun's broken, Yun's broken, sure, like, okay. But I would say that first tier that I had, everybody can beat Chun and Yun in some way, right? And I feel like outside of the very best players playing perfectly all the fucking time, does that not become uh, surmountable, right? Like if you had a Chun that only stuck to the best expected value decisions the entire fucking round for, if you played them in a first to 10, literally all 20 rounds, they play perfectly. Yeah, you're going to have a really fucking frustrating time, but we're all human. Nobody plays like that. And so I don't think the tier list is as fragmented as people want to say. Like I feel like just like my whole, you can cluster people. Third Strike is a cluster of really good characters and pretty decent characters and two
And then Sean
pretty
12.
trashy characters. Yeah.
How much of the mechanics play into that, right? Like there was just like a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of
yeah. No, if it wasn't for parries, it would go pretty horribly for some characters.
sure, because like I imagine, I mean, I don't play any other fighting games. I'm not any good at them, so I don't know anything. But I imagine in some other games, you see like Super Turbo, you see like 7-3 and 8-2 matchups
Eight
listed
twos,
everywhere,
yeah.
and I imagine like that's
Maybe even
just
9-1s.
the word of God, right? Like, there's no way to play around these options except to like
Yeah,
land a
it's
lucky
it's
jump in or something.
it's like those games are true rock paper scissors at times. Um, and I mean, and yeah, and words from literal gods. Well, I guess not literal gods, but figurative gods of the game will tell you that I can't give you a factual example, but let's say Claw beats. I'm not gonna bother. But the point is, it is rock paper scissors, and their strike is much more diminished in that aspect.
Hmm.
Um, because of parries. And parry is the reason why it has been alive for so long, and it will continue to be because it essentially makes their strike not all that solvable, right? Even if you get close to that perfect play, you have to have the perfect human execute that, and that's just not a thing. So
Beautiful.
I remember watching. So we were at Newton, me and Bessels, and you were at Newton, and you sit down in the nuclear rotation, and you just knock him off the cabinet. It's like easy. It was a clean win too. It wasn't
the
you know,
stars aligned,
you
you
just
know.
are you the best Dudley Chun-Li player in the world
In that moment, I was
in that
no.
moment?
No, it's I mean, it's Dudley. Like he's explosive for a reason, right? So, and Nuki, even though he is the god, he's not the perfect human either. So mistakes can take place, and in a short setting like that, like certainly anybody can lose. So that yeah, Dudley has disadvantages, but he's pretty strong too.
What are his disadvantages?
He just gets butt fucked in neutral a lot. So
Okay.
if against perfect players, they can make it really hard for him to get in. So he ends up having to do a lot of either hard reads or hail marys, and that's never exciting play, right? Or that's never compelling play, rather. Um, you don't want to beat somebody because you did a hail mary, but
I do.
it might be exciting for the crowd. But that's about it.
Yeah, Ray's thinking this is my character. Maybe I'm actually a Dudley
Maybe
player.
I'm actually a Dudley player.
Yeah.
Oh, you're
How
gonna
good is
have a really
Dudley?
frustrating time in neutral because
Nah.
Oh yeah.
all that mobility that you lose from Yun, it'll. Yep.
How good is Dudley? I I remember you putting him. We were making like a fucking tier list or matchup chart once, and you were like, "Oh yeah, Dudley's like the seventh best character," which
Yeah,
is
like sixth or seventh
that's
seems about
insane.
right.
Can you explain this to me? Explain this. I think he might be third. Tell me why he's not third.
Just because the people that I feel are above him are people that can perfect play and make it really hard for Dudley.
Sure. And I imagine Chun Yun in particular, right?
Yeah,
Perfectly played Chun
any
Yun.
type of high mobility with good lows, um, like you can maneuver around Dudley pretty easily. So,
Mhm.
uh, I mean, if you're not careful, like he can jump and roundhouse you, sure. But if you play with a specific intent to keep him away and you use your tools very well, it's pretty difficult for Dudley.
Do you think so? There's that Japanese thought that Dudley beats Ken. What do you think?
I feel like it's pretty comparable. I would not argue somebody if they said, Ken is 5.5 or if they said Dudley is 5.5.
Hmm.
Like when I play Dudley, I don't particularly feel uh too strongly about the matchup. Um, so yeah, I don't like yeah, I wouldn't argue it. Like um, yeah. I feel like anything other than to say it could be a toss up is more results oriented than not, right?
Hmm. So
Like
if you feel that he might be even with Ken, and I imagine Dudley Makoto, I imagine this is like even, probably, right? Well, you have any? Dudley obviously beat Chang, not even a question. So how is Dudley the sixth best character?
I feel like let me recount. It was Chun, Yun, Hen, Yang was in there for sure,
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
and I think Makoto was in there. I feel like Makoto can be very frustrating for Dudley as well.
Yeah.
But again, like I'm not the best Dudley, so I like my perception of the like it's a cluster, right? So, uh, me saying Yang beats Dudley at this point is more a meme than
Just an insane thing to say, Kang. I don't know. I have to
no.
take.
Uh, I it's more a meme than anything because it plays into other people's emotions. But I feel like if Yang plays with that specific reason, like as Yang, you're not gonna try to give Dudley a parry into super, right? Because it could snowball really badly out of your favor. Well, so like if you're a Yang that is doing a jump in and doing his little 1-2, and then that's a mistake, right? Um, but if you're a Yang that is trying to keep Dudley away, I feel like the matchup is in Yang's favor. So yeah, it really the play styles makes fights for sure.
Styles make fights. Yep.
Okay, next question. This is a little bit of a shift again. So you have a family now, right? Um, and
Yeah.
how are you balancing continuing to play Third Strike in whatever capacity you can with, being a father and family life?
Um, well, this is why Fight K2 is so beautiful, right? Um, if I didn't have it, right? So, uh, throughout this entire 3 years, like Danka has probably had, let's say, a little over, let's say, 15 sessions. I've probably made three of them. It's really difficult to be in person, at any type of event. So, um, in terms of that, like I don't have a problem sacrificing third strike every time. Um, like fatherhood and raising children is I wish everybody could at the very least feel some aspects of that. Like it's truly magical. Um, so uh, going back to your question, it's pretty much just try to slip in some fight cave when I can. So if I wasn't doing this podcast right now, I'd probably be searching for a set or two against somebody. Um, outside of that, yeah, like um, looking into next year, if I get the itch and want to go to Jazzy 5, it's a hard question to throw at your wife. Like, hey, can you watch the girls for a weekend while I go play some video games? It's difficult for sure.
Are you going to tell her that you're the Jazzy champion and you have to defend your belt?
Yeah, my wife is super supportive in that she um recognizes that I have hobbies,
Mhm.
but at the same time she doesn't give a fuck about that. So like she didn't watch Jazzy. She doesn't watch when I stream. Like She's as not involved as you can get, while also saying, yeah, I mean, you can play Third Strike. But yeah.
We got to do a GoFundMe for a nanny for the weekend for Khang, so we can get him out to Jazzy 5. So
Yeah. Yeah, so there is absolutely no situation where I would be like, "Hey, let's fly to Denver. It's real nice over there." That's not happening. So
yeah,
if I go somewhere, it's pretty much by myself.
my wife was like, "Yeah, I'll go to Denver with you, but I don't care about your stupid game." Like, all right, that's cool.
Yeah, no.
That's
I
fine.
mean, my wife doesn't drink, so
Yep.
there's none of that. So yeah.
All right, so I think we're at
Um,
that point in the podcast now where we're gonna turn it over to some audience questions.
yeah. Are you
Yeah,
Ray? You got the first one.
yeah, for sure, for sure. So, Carlitos, local ST player, turning into the podcast. Shout out to Carlitos. What made you stick to Third Strike? What's the biggest obstacle you have overcame in 3S?
Oh. So what made me stick to their strike? I feel like their strike is the perfect fighting game. I've played other fighting games, and the engine, like the physics of it all, like the movement of most characters, like Necros could just always gonna feel weird, right?
Mm,
But or Sean's super jump is like fucking like there's outliers, of course,
yep,
but overall the fluidity of the game and the movement is what keeps me playing the game. That and Parry is always hype, right?
yep.
But it's mostly the game engine that I think they refined it in a way where it just makes a whole lot of sense. The biggest obstacle that I overcame, I don't, I don't know if I have one. So this was, I guess, ages ago, right? So not only was Justin the nemesis, right?
Mm,
But New York as a whole, like going back to the whole game time era, New York would come down. It would be Justin, Ricky, and Arturo. Like those are the three that played Third Strike, and they would just steamroll everybody. So for a long while, my demon was not only Justin but also Arturo. So we're talking about the first few years,
mm,
like 2003, 4, 5. He played Alex, and I was a Mallrat Goki, right?
mm.
Like, uh, if you saw my play back then, you would barf, right? Um, but there was one tournament at ECC, so East Coast Championships in New Jersey, where I finally beat my demon and beat Arturo. Like prior to that, I really struggled. So, like even though it was not like a real highlight in terms of personal achievement, like that's one that kind of sticks out to me. Even though it's really small on the grand scale of things. So
Very nice, very nice.
yeah.
Okay, next question. Deshaun asks Kang, what is your reasoning behind preferring first attends over short sets?
What's the short set? Like threes, fives,
I don't know,
twos?
two out of like tournament, I guess, 2 out of 3.
I feel like going back to the whole conversation thing, like when you're playing Third Strike against somebody, you're having a conversation with them. So I feel like first attempts are a great way to do that. And more than anything, it just the convenience of it all, right? You know exactly when it's gonna end. You there's a goal there. Um, and there's enough room to have that conversation. There's enough room to make mistakes or learn from them, right? Because ultimately, I advocate for first attempts because I want somebody to be able to formulate what their progress or observe what their progress is like against somebody else. So if you have Ray and Lance play first attempts for an entire year.
Oh, that's a
You
bloodbath.
guys should both be able to walk away from that with very discernible and very concrete ideas of how you play and what kind of growth you can get from that, right? So it's mostly that. In the short term of things, like I don't think that first tens are any, and the importance isn't quite there than it is the long term growth potential of it.
So you're saying first attend's good because it's a long conversation, right? You have room to adapt to each other, and it gives you potential to grow from this adaptation. You're not saying, so do you believe first attends are more, what do you say, like The
The
person who wins the first
definitive
to 10 is
thing?
better. Definitive, yeah.
No.
No,
So
okay.
I think most people look at first to tens as some type of finality to it, and certainly if it can be set up that way, like Clash of the Titans, obviously, a first to ten there means it is a little more final than you playing a first to ten online every day for, you know, a month. Um, it's not the same. Like at that point, the first to ten at TFC looks like, you know, a championship match. But the second example is like casuals, right? No first to ten is more important than the next one. So I think like people who might not be able to appreciate where I'm coming from for that is trying to look at it from the lens of the first to ten and not the second first to ten, where it's just a tool for becoming a better player.
Hmm. I've watched you and Nico play first to tens for years, right? You guys go
Mhm.
back and forth. So to say that one first to ten could ever tell you who the better player is, to me, it makes no sense, right? If you beat Nika today, and then tomorrow Nika beats you, and they're both first to tens,
Yeah,
uh,
it's just one long string of casuals.
sure. So like this goes back to like how do you know who the better player is? You said a long like it has to be a long. So you're saying like sample size is key, right? You said you're a scientist. Sample size is a big thing, right? Like you could know that someone's better than someone else from playing them what hundreds of games, thousands of games.
Yeah, like so going back to that other point I had, like if it is obvious, it doesn't even need to be discussed, right? So if I play Nika first to tens for an entire year and he wins like 80% of them, like obviously he's going to be the better player in that scenario, right? There you can't refute that unless, if I said, well, I don't care about any of them, but if you're playing first to tens for a year, there's got to be some point where your motivation is like, I really need to stop losing, right? Otherwise, you're just, not being truthful to yourself and to others. Um, but at that point, it doesn't need to be discussed. But like, if you had to ask me, hey, what's the first to ten record look like between you and Nika? I have no fucking idea, and that's the point. The point is that you should be using these as uh, 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 a method for you to grow in Third Strike. It's not bragging rights. Like you've never like there's no situation where I'm like, yeah, I fucked Nika up in a first to ten. Like that's not a thing, all right? And it doesn't need to be a thing for anybody. But that finality is so uh, ingrained with the idea of a first to ten that people shy away from this particular approach that I'm kind of advocating for. Now it's different if you're like, hey, I want to have a first to ten with you, and it needs to be serious, and let's put some money on the line. Like that type of first to ten is different from the first to ten I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Like holding a first to ten online, uh, day in day out is it's casuals at that point, right? So like if somebody looked at the replay and saw that singular first to ten, they might think it's serious. But if you enlarge it and you're like, wow, that's just fucking first to 10, 37 out of 385. You're like,
Yeah.
it's yeah,
Sparring. Sparring at
yeah.
that point. Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Next question: how would you rank your own characters from strongest to weakest? This was a fun question from the chat.
Strongest to weakest. So, the tiers kind of play into it a little bit. Um, uh, I've always been the proponent to say that my demeanor and mindset matters more than who it is I'm playing as. So even though I main Dudley, like he might not be my best performing character. So tiers matter in that regard. Where like if I want to play seriously with Chun Li or with Yun, I should have better results than if I wanted to play seriously as Dudley, right? Um, so in terms of proficiency, that top 5, 6 cluster, I'm pretty good with all of them, and I can kind of play them all with a certain level of seriousness where you can't really tell which one might be better than the other. Um, so
I think your
I
chum was
don't.
terrible, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, maybe, but no, mm.
I like King's Yun. I think it's Yun's his best character, but that's just me
Yeah,
being
like if
biased.
if I if I played like super serious and plus EV and limit my mistakes, the likelihood that my Yun looks better than my Dudley is pretty true.
I like it. I like it. All right, next question from Max. Jesus Christ, Max, this is a long fucking
He wrote
question.
an essay.
The fuck. Okay, here we go. First part. How do I get into playing poker competitively? I'm a beginner
Don't
and want to learn because I love gambling and I am a Makoto player.
definitely don't then.
Makoto players shouldn't play poker. Is that what you're saying?
I think that poker at this stage is very difficult for somebody to find success in, um, especially in the short term. Um, so just like anything else, like if you put your mind to it and you put in the honest effort that it requires, then and you have the propensity and the skill sets necessary to be a winning player, then you're probably going to come out as a winning player. However, the game is at the very least 21 years in the mainstream already, right? 2002, 2003, Chris Moneymaker and WSOP in the main event and all that stuff. So all of those 20 plus years, poker has advanced and people know a lot more now than they did back then. So if you are trying to be serious at poker, your level of effort has to be much, much higher compared to Exodus in 2005, you know. Um, so from that perspective, if you're trying to make money, it's 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 a hard ask, right? Um, yeah, that
Yeah.
that I jokingly say don't, but ultimately, it's things have to be right for you to be a winning player. Learning poker in 2023,
Do you still play it all?
casually
Okay.
online,
Yeah.
yeah, but not with any regularity.
Did that Robbie girl cheat at poker?
Um, that's a funny question. Like, so Lance is referring to a very specific
Yeah.
scenario that happened a few months back. And if I had to pick a side, I would probably go with yeah, something went off there because if you understand poker, um, you know, the stars would have to align for that to be an innocent um scenario.
Okay, explain that to me. I don't know shit about poker. Explain like I'm a 5-year-old because I probably am. Explain to me why it's impossible for her to have made that hard read or whatever.
Um, so there's just literally no like she would have had to think that her jack high was good.
Poor King.
Things dying over here.
I know, right? It's like, hey, King, I know you're not feeling well. Do you want to get on this 3 hour long podcast?
It's okay. Um, so that in that specific scenario, jack high was only beating his exact hand and losing to everything else that he could have had. So you're talking about and even then he could still win because that the river was not there yet. So I think I forget the exact percentage, but in that specific scenario where he had the exact hand that he had, she was ahead. So her jack high was slated to win, but the percentage where I think it was just a coin flip at that time. Um, but then if he had any other hand um, at all, she was losing quite a bit, right? And the reason why that is when you're playing poker, you have this, you're basically starting with a very wide range that you expect your opponent to have, right? And as you get more information, you want to narrow that range down and say these are the combinations of hands that he could have. So for her to exercise that and say, my Jack High is good here in some way, it's just not within that realm of of possibilities. Like there's just no possible way. So the other explanation was, she could have misread her hand, um, but given the actions that came before it and her rationalizations after, I don't think she misread her hand. Like it was probably like it. There were enough markers there to kind of say that something nefarious was going on.
You're saying she never, like, she should have just known, like, she did, like, she was ahead, but she shouldn't have known she was ahead, and like she doesn't know enough about the game to realize how bad it makes her look that she.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
There's also that aspect too. Like anybody can recognize that she's not the brightest when it comes to poker, right?
Uh-huh.
Because the bullshit just doesn't make sense. Um, but it's just like, just if you if you're a beginner, like a total beginner, you can only look at what the cards are in front of you and think about what hand you have at that point in time. She literally had Jack High, like so. Queen High beats her, King High beats her, Ace High beats her, any pair beats her, and so
Mm.
on and so forth. Like we're talking about bottom of the barrel at this point, right? Um, so for her, like let's say there's no analysis there. You are looking at the cards that you are dealt and the board on the table. If you are if you literally only have Jack High and you're like, I call, like it, there's just no realm of possibility where that makes sense. Um, because you have Jack High, right? So yeah, I don't know.
Okay, that was a segue. It had nothing to do with third strike.
Pretty big segue.
Okay,
so so
back to
ne-
third strike questions.
so next two parts of Max's question here. Um, and this one's pretty good. I actually like hearing from people, top players, about this. So, other than that, how do you keep calm in tournament situations when your execution falters? So, I know I'm really big on that too. When I drop something, I like the game almost stops, even though it doesn't stop. I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh, I fucked that up, and then I just start focusing on like, yeah, you fucked that up. You could have won there. Like, blah 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 blah, and then I'm like stop playing the game almost. Like it's just like the game's going on in the background and focus on that. So how do you block that out? Because I know that entire weekend when I was watching you play specifically, like you're just like, all right, here I'm playing third strike, because you can look around the room and kind of gauge people's like faces and expressions, right? Like people are stressing the fuck out, like they're you can see it on their face. But with you, I didn't really get that from you all weekend. You're just like, I'm here, boys. What's
Yeah.
going on? So how do you stay calm in like tournament situations like that?
So my threshold for where that hits is probably higher than most people. So like if I'm about to die, like it might be more frustrating than, beginning of the round. Right. Um, but it also varies depending on um how serious I'm taking this particular match. And so if you if things line up to where you are taking this match seriously, then it's pretty difficult to avoid that scenario where you mess up and then you're hard on yourself, right? That's gonna happen. I feel like that's natural. And so the only way to be, um, combat that is with repeated um, scenarios happening over and over again. So play more, forgive yourself, and over time you will develop that ability to kind of let it slide. That doesn't necessarily mean that it won't manifest at some point again, but ultimately, this is like your skin hardening, and you don't feel the pain as much. Um, so yeah, play more. Be like you're gonna get into more stressful situations, and you should strive to take away something from it every single time it happens. Um, I mean, you're talking to the guy who probably has the most games played online in general, right?
Mhm.
So that scenario has happened to me over and over and over and over again, and um, you know, uh, the complacency helps. But at the end of the day, if I'm trying to be serious, and I'm sure you've seen some sets with me playing against Neiman, and things don't go out the way that I would like. So even for the most hardened persons, it still happens. So uh, certainly forgive yourself from that perspective. But ultimately, just keep playing.
Those are my favorite King streams where he just sits in silence, fuming, playing Neiman. Just an hour stream of silence. We're all having fun. We're all having a great time.
Yeah.
All right, Lance, you want the next one?
Sure. Will you play Nika first to 10 until the end of time?
Yeah. If he's around, yeah.
Nice. That was a quick one. That was
Yeah.
pretty good.
uh, Sonny's got a
If I'm
really
still
good
playing the
question.
game, it helps to play against some of the best players. So
I like to think that we're all in like the retirement home, like just wheeling in the versus city, like in our wheelchairs, just playing Third Strike, still talking shit. So,
I'd be okay with that for sure.
Sonny has a great question here. He's like, "What did you learn from Japan gameplay wise? Can you recall any specific adjustments to your game you could go into?"
Um, so in terms of Japan, it wasn't too much realizing them than it was just kind of acknowledging that, my pitfalls are, the variance is just there, right? They play in a way where it's much more streamlined to my initial advice, which is, the start with a good set of uh, options. Um, but yeah, and they're pretty fast about it, so they're just better, right? Um, and so uh, it's sort of like uh, in boxing or in some type of competitive physical sport. Um, there's this thing called wasted movement, right? Where it's essentially the better you are, the more fat you trim off of that wasted movement. So in Japan, um, they're just more refined with that, and then you can kind of get a sense of that in their play. Um, uh, at specific adjustments to my game. No, I feel like the entire time that I was there, I pretty much wanted to kind of get a sense of where I was with the things that I already have developed over time. Um, so one funny example was I was in the Maniacs with Lance and Vessels, and we ended up playing against Hebo Ryu's team, and I had no idea who the fuck he was. Uh, um, so at that time, I had this one, fuzzy set play where I would do cork, right? And after cork, I would just whiff a standard medium kick, and that was my frame kill to super jump and do a safe jump. Um, and he just ripped EX Shoryu both times, and I was not prepared for that. Um, and so, I was just going with what I knew. So there was no situation where I could be like, I have to adjust here. I can't fucking because it's too short of a time. Like you don't get that opportunity to uh, readjust outside of playing a really long set with somebody. But I don't. Aside from playing Genki, uh, which was really fun, by the way. But in that specific one, I don't think I did anything different. Even in that conversation, I think it was just to have that conversation because it was our first conversation.
Mm.
It's really good.
Yep. Genki thought very highly of Khang. He just talked my ear off about how good Khang is. And I was like, yeah, cool. It's really riveting stuff, man. Tell me more about how good Khang is. Okay, next question. Okay, this is from one of our local Super Turbo players. Do you play Super Turbo? If so, which character? What are some differences between Super Turbo and Third Strike players? Do you have any insights on this?
I have literally zero insights because I do not play Super Turbo. I don't play any Street Fighter or any fighting game other than Third Strike.
Can I
Sorry.
answer this question?
Very boring answer
Sure.
for you.
ST players are fucking psychopaths. I don't know how you guys go into a match knowing it's 9-1 and still keep playing the game. I don't understand that. Like, you guys are masochists, dude. Second, I don't understand how you
Yeah,
grind that game.
I do not like the every single time I play an older school Street Fighter, I feel so restrictive in movement, so it's awful.
All right. So another question here: do you have any hobbies or interests outside of Third Strike?
Um, it was poker for quite a long time until I became a family man, essentially. Then you needed a little more stability. Um, but I collect Marvel cards.
Okay.
So, um, growing up in the 90s, Marvel cards were pretty big, and so that's a huge nostalgia thing for me. So, um, I collect Marvel comic trading cards. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. Okay, I'm going to do some rapid fire questions, and we will call it a night. How's that sound?
Sure.
Okay. Who is your Third Strike rival?
Um, I don't know if I have a rival in that regard. I feel like, the online titans are always going to be um more or less r- the closest examples to that. But I don't think I have had a real rival since my buddy Eric Lee, Shinsei,
Mm-hmm.
um or Denjin Lee. Like we kind of were raised up in the same scene. Like he was part of the Game Time crew, and for a long time since we had this kind of rapport where we would just keep trading um, matches with each other. So actually, I guess it was him and Kaofin. They were my rivals during that era. But in terms of this more modern, last decade, I don't have any one particular rival per se.
Who are the online titans? You said the online titans. Who are those people?
Nika, Tenren, Neiman.
The
Yeah,
three. You
and
guys are the four horsemen of the lag apocalypse. All of you are lag abusers. Just FYI. Anyway, okay. You are an alien comes down. He is a great, incredible Third Strike player.
I'm familiar
He,
with this question.
yeah, you have to choose one player who's not yourself. He has to be American. He cannot be Issei. These are all the stipulations we established so far. You have to play first to one for your life. Who do you choose?
Um, the Lance Show. I don't know if you're familiar with
Okay, you're
him.
good. You're dead. So I'm gonna miss a hit confirm, and that's gonna be it. You're like, sorry, bro.
Yeah, Lance is like, I don't fucking know. I don't know. That ain't
Yeah,
had it.
I would probably choose hmm. I don't think I could go wrong with any of the online notables. So probably Nika, Tenren, Yuki, and Neiman. Any of them would probably work. They're
Nice.
all very they're all very single-minded focus in
Cool.
that regard. I would
Um,
not pick myself.
yeah, I wouldn't pick you either.
Yeah.
I thought about this question for myself, and I would not entrust myself to your hit confirms. Um, why do you play Dudley as a main, and also why do you play so many characters?
Third Strike is fun, so that's the second question. I like just I do a lot of character roulette when I play. Um, and then why do I pick Dudley? I feel like he's right where that balance is between pretty good offensively and pretty bad defensively. Like he's good. He's a powerhouse, but he has drawbacks and he has vulnerabilities, and I feel like that's an interesting character to latch onto. Um, yeah.
What are your top 5 video games of all time?
So one and two are probably so Chrono Trigger is the first one, and I really enjoyed The Last of Us, so that would
Oh,
probably be my second. And then third will probably be Tactics.
You're talking Final
Um,
Fantasy Tactics?
yeah,
Okay.
and then fourth might be Suikoden too. I really enjoyed that one.
We got a JRPG guy here for sure. Okay.
And then fifth might be shit. That's a good question. I don't have a good answer for fifth.
Okay, so there's of his top 5 favorite games, there are 4, and none of them are Third Strike. Okay, perfect.
Oh yeah, no, I figured Third Strike is
Okay,
probably exempted from the
sure.
question. I didn't realize it was inclusive.
No, that's fine. That's all
Oh,
my rapid fire questions. Ray, do you have any?
yes. Will Khang be playing Season of Discovery, World of Warcraft, with me and the boys? Damn.
nope.
Can we convince him to?
Mm-mm.
Oh,
Why
shit.
not?
Tragedy.
There's just no time. So
Yeah.
I'm going back to the whole competitive thing. I'm pretty competitive. So if I can't put enough effort into something, then I'd rather not do it. So in this case, uh, being that you raid and you gotta put up logs and you gotta put up numbers.
Mm.
Like even if I just play 2-3 hours a day, that's just not enough to fully. And I tried that. I tried it in Shadowlands where
Yeah.
I kind of um shorted my guild because I didn't have enough time outside of raid time to really put in the effort to learn the fights. So I learned as I was playing, and that's all. Sometimes it can get pretty
Disastrous.
embarrassing,
Sometimes,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
So at that point, I can't invest the time into it.
Final Fantasy Tactics, old translation or new translation?
It's been so long I don't recall the differences.
Okay, old translation is the correct answer. Just FYI.
Uh, I'm familiar with your answer, yeah.
All right. Any other questions from the chat?
Mm, will we see you at Jazzy next year? Will you defend your belt?
Most.
I'll consider it. Yeah, it's not ruled out, but it's not also not going to be shocking if I don't go.
Yeah. You
I certainly hope everybody else goes though, because at the end of the day, I want to one reward the Jazzy organizers for their time and effort. I feel like participation is the best way to show that appreciation. But again, everybody has life circumstances, though. Uh,
do
yeah,
you feel any guilt for the amount of times you've let me down in teams over the last decade?
not one bit. No.
Okay, perfect.
And if we team up again, it will probably be the same.
I have a feeling.
Dr. Steelhammer asked, "Can I have your sword?"
Go to Jazzy 5 and win. You can have my sword.
I have a feeling Nika's gonna show up this year and Kang's not. They're just gonna be forever ducking each other at Jazzy. They have off years. So.
I have a sword that I won from a small tournament held in Cincinnati, Ohio. It was Civil War, and they had a real life replica sword. It was awesome. An awesome trophy. The Jazzy belt's cool and the Jazzy jacket is cool, but that sword is pretty sick.
Oh, Kang, what's your last and second question from James? What's your co-op team five, your dream co-op five that you could team with? So I'm not just
Um,
like Americans or Europe,
yeah, I think
Japanese.
thematically it would make sense to have an American top five, like so the American Titans. And I feel like it's pretty close to that we would have. So, um, in terms of like the ultimate team, like I don't have enough knowledge of the Japanese players to. I mean, can you really go wrong if you picked four really godlike Japanese players? I don't think
No, we're
so.
talking about that you could team with. So you're
Oh,
Americans or Europeans. What's your
well,
dream
well
team?
then I can't team with anybody because nobody wants to team with me.
Okay. What's the best team you could put together that would actually want a team? That brings up a different question, right? So we didn't even discuss this. I kind of mentioned this in the Nika podcast of like teams in America has been there's a New York team with Nika, Frankie, sometimes Issei. There's like the Ryan Yi Yuki team, right? Often.
Yeah, there's too much fragmentation within the community to
Uh-huh.
really.
Okay.
But I think in an ideal world, I would like an American Titans team to work together, and I think it would fit out really well.
What are the
Um,
Titans? What does this mean? Give me names. This is the
you know,
question.
um, Nika Yuki, 5 star, and myself. That's 4 different characters already,
Okay.
right? And then the Lance show as an anchor. It's perfect. It makes
Well,
perfect sense, right?
you're really speaking my language here.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
Amazing. Okay.
No,
That's
but
all
I,
I've
I
got.
think I think it would be exciting for Americans to actually
Work
you know,
together.
and it's I don't have any aspirations of getting first at Coop, right? But it's like
Mm.
in terms of the theme, like you want to see how far you can get given the dynamics that you have, and
Far be it for me to second guess you, King. But I would replace me with Tenrin, obviously. Like Tenrin fucking like
yeah,
he
no, Tenren's a good. I wouldn't even consider him just because he's not really a tournament goer.
yeah,
Like
the year he
as
went to
in as
co-op,
in the
he dominated,
possibility.
right?
So
Crushed.
yeah,
He did a lot of work at co-op.
yeah, he did.
What a guy. All right, that's all I got. Ray, do you have anything?
No closing statements, King?
um, thank you guys for having me. This
Of
was a lot of
course.
fun,
Thank
and just the usual stuff. But I hope everybody can just keep playing the game and keep enjoying it, and throughout the years, there's always some type of toxicity or disagreements that crop up. But ultimately, I think we can all be served better if we just kind of set all of that aside and just continue playing. Um, yeah, and go to Jazzy 5.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for tuning into this podcast. We'll upload the replay to YouTube like we normally do, and then thank you once again, King, for joining us. Much
Thank
appreciated.
you.
So,
Yeah.
I've chosen to ask who's the next guest. Next guest is Caesar, Big Nasty. He'll be on next week.
Big
Hey.
So,
Nasty. Congratulations on
so
becoming a dad.
yeah, we're gonna talk about that next week. So next week, Sunday as well. I'll post a time on Twitter, so just stay tuned. So, once again, thank you guys for tuning in, and then thank you, Kang, for joining us. So, I'll go ahead and stop
Thank
the
you.
stream there. So, thanks everyone.